Hello! One of the questions I get asked frequently is how do I bring my Blender animations over to Motion? So I'm going to show you how I do that today. But first, before I get started, I would like to give you a little intro of what Blender is. Blender is a free, open source 3D creation suite. It supports the entirety of the 3D pipeline: modeling, rigging, animation, simulation, rendering, compositing, and motion tracking. And it even does video editing and game creation. Blender is also cross-platform and runs equally well on Linux, Windows, and Macintosh computers. Blender got its start in 1988 as a proprietary tool for the animation studio called Neo Geo, which quickly became the largest 3D animation studio in the Netherlands. Over the years, Blender became an open source tool. Blender is a very powerful, free creation suite that can handle photorealistic renderings, very fast modeling. It can also do fast rigging for character animation. You can do sculpting. It also has a full compositor, so you can do your compositions inside of Blender and not have to go anywhere else. It can also do amazing simulations. It can do fluid, smoke, hair, cloth, rigid body physics, and particles. Also, since it has a large community of enthusiasts and developers, Blender has a large collection of extensions that you can turn on and off easily. You may download Blender for free at blender.org. Also, for those that may not know, Motion is a software created by Apple. It is less than $50 on the App Store. You can use Apple's Motion to create your own effects, your own generators, your own transitions, and your own titles that you can use inside of Final Cut Pro. You can download Apple's Motion software at Apple's website, apple.com. So what I am going to do now is I will show you how to use the script that allows you to export the Blender keyframes over to Motion. So the first thing you need to do is look for the script, which is an extension that was created for free. This script was created by Andrew, also known as OSXrules, and he was good enough to create this script for us. So big thank you to OSXrules from Blender Artist. We really appreciate this script. And to find it, you can just go to Google and look for Blender to Apple Motion script. And then you will look for the one that says Blender Artists and click on that. You will look for the first download link and then click on that. And it will download it to your computer. Okay, we'll leave it there for now and we'll come back to it later. So inside of Blender, I'm going to quickly show you how this script works. So let me open up a file that I have made previously. This is one of the templates I have made. And as you can see, it's a very simple animation. I just have 3 different discs coming out. And as you can see in the motion animation, I have 7 different drop zones appearing behind the stage. So all I really did was create the stage appearing inside of Blender. The only animation inside of this Blender file is the camera. So as you can see, the camera is moving around the stage as it appears. So the information I need to send to Motion is actually the keyframe animation and the positions of all these drop zones. So I'm going to animate the drop zones inside of Motion. And that gives me more freedom in case I change my mind or decide to do any changes. I'd rather do it inside of Motion. I try to do as much as I can inside of Motion and only do what I really have to do inside of Blender. When I export this Blender file to Motion, it's going to send every element I have here. So I can use any of this reference points inside of Motion. And the ones I do not need, I can just delete them out inside of Motion. And also when I render this file, I'm going to render this whole background, which I'll use as a background, and I'm also going to create an alpha matte of the stage. I will show you how to do this in a future tutorial, as right now I just really want to show you is how to export the keyframes out from Blender. So if I want to apply an image inside of motion to an actual object, what I like to do, for example, this little cross, what we call that is an empty. So an empty is just pretty much a null object. It's just a placeholder. But I like to use that as a way to tell me where the objects are going to be attached to. So what I did is when I first created this animation of these dropping plates, what I did is I created the cube and then I attached that null to the cube. The only thing you have to do to attach that is to drag the null object into the cube, and then the parent becomes the cube. And all these are run by Blender's physics engine, and all I have to do is control the physics, and then Blender handles the animation. So let me show you how I create a null object. I'm going to start with a new project, and I'm just going to show you with this little sample how to attach a null object to an actual object. So what I'm going to do is click on Shift A, create a mesh, and I am going to create a cube. I will scale the cube up, and now I will also click Shift A, and then I will add an empty, and the empty will be a plain axis. So I'm going to go to display here, toggle view, toggle quad view, and this shows me all the different angles. And as you can see, the empty is right in the middle. So what I'm going to do is push that forward. And now that null object is in the front of the cube, so it's closer to the camera. This is the top view, and this is the camera view. So now all I need to do is grab this empty and push it into and drop it into the cube. So now the cube is the parent of the empty. So whatever direction I turn this cube in, as you can see here, here's the actual null object. If I turn this, you'll see the null objects turning with it. So what I do is when I render this animation and I export the script, what I'll use these little null objects for is for my drop zones or for my images, and it's just a way to track where I want my images to go. And you can use that for anything, if you want to be a marker for your text or for lights or for anything you use. I just tend to use null markers because you do not need to worry about the size or the scale of it. All you need to do is drop it, and then you can worry about the scaling and the rotation inside of motion. Let's do an animation here, and we'll export it to motion so you get an idea of how it works. So what we want to do now is let's reset this cube to where it was, and what I want to do now is I'm going to set the start frame at 0 because motion starts at 0, and now what I want to do is go to frame 60, which is 1 second in, since I'm at 60 frames a second. And what I want to do is go to my scale on my toolbar or my inspector bar, and I'm going to hover over scale and just click the letter I, and that sets it in frame. And you could also do it over the cube or over your canvas just by clicking I, and then you can select what kind of keyframe you want to add. So either way is fine. So what I do is go to 60, and then at 0 I'm going to make this 0 and then click on the letter I. So now I have that, and then I'll go to frame 120, and then I will click on, let's rotate this. Actually, I'm going to set a keyframe at 60, and I'm going to set a keyframe for the rotation. Now go to frame 120, and I'll rotate the Z at 90 degrees, click I, then go to 180, and I'm going to rotate the Y at 90 degrees, click I, so now you see this, and then one more at the end at 240, and the X 90 degrees, click on I. So now you'll see we get this little animation. And just to make it a little nicer and really show some cool little feature in here in Blender, I'm going to split this area here, and I'm going to open up my graph editor so I can see all the keyframes. I'm going to select A and then click on the home key so you can see everything. And now that I clicked on the letter A, make sure everything's selected. These are all my keyframes. I'm going to go to Key and go to Interpolation mode, and I'm going to choose on Dynamic Effects Back. And this actually gives it a nice little bounce animation without having to play with the keyframes. So now if you can see, it has a little cool little bounce effect to it. Okay, so if you want to take this further, you can always, I'm going to save this, box spin. If you want to take this further, you can add null objects to all different sides of the cube, and your imagination can go wild. Right now, my goal is just to show you how to export the keyframes over to Motion. Okay, before I export, I need to go into File, User Preference, and now what I want to do is install that script that we downloaded from Blender Artist. So now what we want to do is go to Install from File, look for that file that you downloaded. It was zipped. I already unzipped it. So just click on it and click on Install File. Once you have done that, just do the search for, start to type in Apple, and then you'll see the script come up. Import, export, export Apple Motion. And just make sure that's checked on. That means it's on and ready to use. So now we can close this window. Let's save this again. And now we will go to File, Export, Apple Motion. Okay. And then just click Export Apple Motion File. You can now go to your Finder window. Look for the Apple Export Motion file, boxspin, boxspin.motn. MOTN means motion file. Now we will double click on it and open up the motion file. And as you can see, all the layers that were created are in here. And here's the empty that we created. And you can relabel these inside of Blender to help you stay organized. So as you can see the animation happening here. So to see it better, let's just add a drop zone. Actually, let's add an image file. Let's add this one here. And what I like to do is, after I added the image, I like to group that image just so I get a little more control later on. And now I can control the rotation. Let's go 90 degrees. And here it is. Let's do 90 degrees on this one. And let's bring the scale down. And those are the keyframes brought over from Blender into Motion. Now I'll show you another file that I created from Blender. Let's go back to Blender. Let's open that big stage intro. This one right here. And I'm going to export this. And this is the only thing that's animating here is the camera. And all the drop zone or null markers are steady, but you will see the cameras moving around. So now I'll go to File, Export, Apple Motion File, and click Export. And that's it. Now we go to here, double click on the Stage 2 for tutorial that I created, and you'll see all the elements came in. I like to bring all the elements in just because sometimes you need something, you come up with an idea, you want to add a drop zone or an element at a different position, so you have all the elements that you need, and if you don't need them, just delete them from Motion. So for this tutorial, I'm just going to delete everything. So I'm going to delete everything except for the camera and the drop zones. It also brings in the light, So if I wanted to add my own light in motion, I can to match up the Blender light. And there's a camera animation. This one and this one. I'm just going to reorganize this. Okay, so now we can see drop zone 1. So I'm going to add a new drop zone. I'm going to group this. And now what I want to do is I'm going to rotate that group so it faces the camera by 90 degrees. And I want to scale this down to 12%. Okay, as you can see, there's the camera animation. So I'm going to do the same for the rest of them. So I'm just going to do group, new drop zone. Just make sure to label them correctly. 1, 2. Okay. And now the last one, new drop zone, group it. You do not have to group it, but I just found it's a lot easier to control and you have a lot more flexibility once you start getting deeper into your animations. So click on 90 degrees, 12, and that's it. As you can see, all the animations are there. And the first drop zone kind of jumps in front of the camera, so I'm just going to put an alt. Okay, right around here it appears in front of the camera, so I'm just going to click on the letter O on the drop zone so it ends there, so it doesn't go in front of the camera. And that's it. So what I want to do now is I'm going to add the background. So I can now close all these. And I'm going to go to new group. I'm going to call this one background. And now go to file browser. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in the rendered movie I brought out of Blender. And I rendered the actual animation, and I also rendered the alpha of the stage. So I'm going to bring them both in, import, and I'm going to make that a flat 2D channel by clicking on this little icon here with the 3 layers on top of each other. And when you click on it, it makes it into a flat animation. And now the only thing I need to do is make this background all the way at the bottom so it's behind the drop zones. And there you go. Okay, and the reason I have an alpha matte is because there's some drop zones that appear behind the stage, and I don't want that to happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new group, call this one drop zones, and I'm just going to bring all of these into that group. And on that group, I'm going to add an image mask. I'm going to add that stage alpha that I created. And so I can show you here what the stage alpha is. It's just an alpha channel of the stage itself. And what that allows me to do also is if I want to change the color of the stage, the color of the background, I can use this matte to separate the different video files. I'll show you how to do that in a second. Okay, go to layers. Okay, now I have the image mask set. I just go to Luma and then go to invert. So I was using a luminous channel and I just inverted it. So as you can see, now it appears as the drop zones are behind the stage. So I'm going to add some images to these drop zones so we can get to see them better. So let's go to pictures. Okay. And there we go. And make these bigger. There you go. So now you can do what you want with these drop zones. If you want to animate each one individually, this is why you would use the group. I can go to this group and let's say I want to rotate it and fade it in. So let's say at the beginning, I want to, let's say it's 0, and then a few frames in, I want to make that 90. Forgot to add the keyframe. Let's go to the beginning again. 0. And then I can go, let's say, actually let's affect the scale. Let's go back to the beginning and let's type in 0. Okay, so now if I want to do the same for the rest of them, I can just select that group. Say open this group. All I have to do is drag that transform, this whole box, onto, let's say, the other group. Okay, and I can do the same for the rest of them. So they're all going to animate in, and then I can offset each one. And there we go. And what I meant before about separating the video channel, let me show you what I meant, is you can take this and let's go to the beginning and you can duplicate it. And the top one can be stage and the second one can be background. My spelling's a little off. There we go. And with the stage, I can do is add an image mask, drop that alpha, stage alpha, onto that image mask. And let me turn off the background so you can see what we're doing. And now I can just do luminance. And there you go. So if we turn the background back one on, and then I can go into the background and add, like, let's say a tint. Now I can control the background color. So usually what I do inside of Blender, I render everything in grays. And that gives me the option to control the colors inside of Motion. And that's pretty much it. You can go inside and customize the drop zones, add some mattes, reflections, whatever you wish. I hope this tutorial was able to show you or guide you a little bit on how to use the Blender to Motion script. If you want to find tutorials on how to use Blender, make sure you go to blenderguru.com or cgcookie.com for some very advanced tutorials. Also, if you're looking for 3D models to use inside of Blender, you can find some amazing free models at blendswap.com. Also, make sure you check out Blender Market at cgcookiemarkets.com for high quality 3D models that you can use inside of Blender. Also, if you're looking for more tutorials on Blender or Motion, make sure you use Google. You'll find tons of them out there. Also, be sure to visit blender.org for more resources and information. And special thanks to OS10Rules at blenderartist.org. And please visit my website at motionmastertemplates.com and check out all the other templates I have made. Please let me know what you think. Thank you for your time and have an amazing day.